Income Podcast April live stream. Please be sure to join the Passive Income Posse by clicking that subscribe button below. Super excited for today's live panel. All female voices. Candace and I are both in Canada, and then we have Justine in California and Hot Girl Finance. So let's just kick it off. I guess obviously one of the first topics of discussion, what is it like to be a woman in finance? Candace?
Well, I think it's probably like anything else. Now, I have a little bit of a tech background, and tech was the same way. When I first started working in tech, it was an all boys club. So a lot of times you'd be overlooked and people wouldn't take your opinion as serious. So I find this is kind of the same idea. But once you go in and you start really demonstrating that you know your stuff, people basically start to give you the respect that you deserve.
Right. And again, first, Justine, welcome back. Your third and now league leading appearance on the Passive Income Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me again. I'm super excited to be here. This is going to be fun. We've got females up in the house, and so it's always a good thing. Thanks,
I'm
Dave.
only a two-timer.
Yeah, Candace is here for the second time. Hot Girl Finance first timer. So I do have to warn you though, Justine. It has been my experience that women do get sick of me over time. So we might need to slow it down so you don't get too sick of me.
You're good in my books, Dave.
Awesome. And I know that you're doing a thing coming up, basically like is it a webinar or is it an actual seminar, live person for women in finance? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So actually on April 22nd, Saturday, April 22nd, 10 a.m. Pacific time, I'm going to be hosting a free investing workshop for women. If you are 16 and over and you have a job, it would make sense for you to come and join. 18 and over, I'm hosting it just for women. And the reason why is because I don't think we have enough female investors in the space. And I think the sooner we start, the younger we start, the moment as a female, as a woman, as a girl, we start working and we earn that first paycheck, we got to already immediately start thinking about how we can grow our wealth. So I'm super passionate about helping women, and I'm super passionate about helping people of color and people that look like me. And so I wanted to put that online webinar together. It's free. And more important, because I've attended a lot of investing workshops for women. I just want to keep it 100. And if you follow me and you know who I am, I'm going to keep it real. And there's going to be no fluff, no gimmicks, no frills. Like, I'm just going to be straight up about investing. And I'm not going to sell shit. I'm tired of that. I'm tired of attending a free webinar and there's like a sales pitch at the end. It's really fucking annoying. So for me, I just want to keep it 100 with my ladies and let them know, listen, we need to start investing, and here's how you do it, and here's how you get into the stock market. So that's awesome. What my free webinar is going to be about. And I just want to spread the word, and I just want to help women out. So
nice.
That's what it is.
Yeah, let's bring Hot Girl Finance into the conversation.
Yeah, so I love that mission that Justine has there. Seeing the same thing so often. We're told, oh, it's too hard. Oh, someone else will take care of it. Your company will do it for you. Your partner, whoever. And it's really have to take ownership. Those days are over, so to speak, and we have to own it.
100%.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree with that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Agree with that. Oh yeah.
But yeah, you're mentioning those seminars where they're trying to sell you stuff. The ones I really hate are the ones that are like, okay, the big secret that you're here for today, we'll get to that a little later. Yeah. They keep doing that over and over again and sort of draw you along through it. And by the time you're finished, it's like, this was just a big waste of time. They're trying to
big sales pitch, and yeah,
45-minute commercial.
Yes. You know what? I attended one, and I'm not going to put their stuff out there, But I did attend one, and they're big. They got a massive following on Instagram, and I'm sure if you have scrolled through, you might have come across their content. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to attend their investing class for women, created for women by women. And then I went to I attended that free seminar, and let me tell you, it was not about investing at all. And when you would read the chat, there was a lot of women who were, once they made the sales pitch, a lot of the women in there were so angry. They were so upset. They were so let down. And the way that I look at it is that we already have it difficult. We already have it a lot harder than men do. And so the last thing we need to do is like make it more difficult for the women that we're supposed to be helping. So for me, I left that webinar feeling really upset and angry. And then when I tried to figure out why I was angry, I realized that I was disappointed because it was more of, here, pay thousands of dollars for our coaching program, but you sold it as an investing workshop, and you didn't even talk about investing. So you can imagine. And I think, as women who are trying to get into that investing space, if you're sold like that, you're going to be deterred from wanting to actually get your foot through the door.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, that was like my little 9 a.m. morning rant here in California. But I think if we're going to help women, let's help women.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with trying to sell something. However, if you're going to make me sit through 45 minutes, you're going to give me some good content so that I don't feel like my time's been wasted. And then if you have something that is like taking it the next step, sure, if I'm interested in going the next step, that's great. Or if I'm not, I've still got my money's worth for the first 45 minutes. That's what I would want to see.
Right.
Agreed.
So,
be clear.
Absolutely. But yeah, I'm curious to hear, Candace, Hot Girl Finance, when did you start investing? What urged you to start investing? Like, what was the catalyst, the fire that ignited?
Well, I mean, I will start. Basically, right around the beginning of the pandemic,
Awesome.
I was watching YouTube endlessly because there was nothing better to do, and I actually came on a video from Kevin O'Leary, and he was going on about this ETF he had, and I was looking at the compounding on it, and I was like, wait a minute, that's really cool. I should probably be doing something like this. And so then when I decide I'm going to obsess on something, I go in 100%. So I, consumed a lot of YouTube. I read a lot of books and brought myself up to speed as fast as possible. And then I wanted to do YouTube. So what I did is I got involved with a already community in the finance section, and I started really helping different people so that when I did start my channel, which I did in 2021, I already had my name in a community so that I could pull some people in right away just to help give me a bit of a start. And then since then, I haven't looked back. Like, I think to be successful nowadays in finance is that you can never stop learning because it's always changing. Things are always happening. And no matter how much you think you know, you've got a lot more to learn always. And that's kind of the passion that I've taken towards YouTube and towards everything that I'm doing within the social media influence to really hammer home the experience that I have and the experience that I'm provided to my viewers, to my community, to anybody who wants help from my community.
That's really
I love
interesting. I came from kind of the opposite direction. I've been investing for 15, 20 years, and was really fortunate to learn from my parents, came up, worked in the finance space, and really was more sheltered and took it for granted, really, that everyone had the same background. Everyone knew how to get involved. Everyone knew what to do once they got there. And slowly realized, talking to friends and meeting people, that wasn't the case. And recently decided, hey, I know this stuff. There's a lot of people out there who don't. I can help them. And so, wanted to start getting involved that way. So it was a little different from what's really valuable to people. And one of my struggles is, I have knowledge that I've gained over the years, and reminding myself, it takes a lot of work to get there. Not everyone knows that. And so I've sometimes imposter syndrome of, I shouldn't talk about this because everyone knows, right? I'm wasting people's time almost. And so it's getting past that and really coming to meet people where they are.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. It's like two different backgrounds, which is great, which I think is beautiful, right? Because at the end of the day, I think that's the real definition of the whole personal finance journey, is that we all come from different backgrounds. So.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. That's amazing. I didn't learn about investing from my parents. I'm first generation. My parents came here from the Philippines, from two very small towns. And so for them, they have that scarcity mindset of save. And then also that fear of not wanting to invest because it was very risky, right? And so growing up, that was kind of what they taught me. We're just like, save all your money, Justine, save. And bless them, because I know that there are other people out there who weren't even taught that, right? To save their money. So I'm super grateful for my parents, but at some point, right, you guys, like, you have the parents of the education from your parents, you have the education from your school system, and then you have your self-education, right? And so for me, that self-education light bulb, it happened when I was 29. I was going through a really hard time in my life. I was just coming out of like a domestic violence relationship. It was like the low of the low, like I was just down on the ground. It was awful. But then I met who is my mentor now. She just completely opened my eyes to investing and just being a woman that is self-sufficient and independent and is not relying on someone for the bag, for the money, So, and the thing is, that's always been me. But when you are, unfortunately, sometimes when you're caught up in something that is dangerous and scary, you act out of fear and you kind of forget who you are, right? So it took a lot of healing, but then eventually I was like, oh my God, oh my goodness, I cannot save myself to wealth. I cannot expect, I can't expect to grow my wealth if I just keep working the same kind of job. I'm not asking for that raise. I'm not increasing my income. And more important, I'm not investing. So I started investing when I was 29. And then now I'm 34, I'm turning 35. It's like, good job, girl. Good job. So happy to be investing. And as much as possible, what I try to do, and I'm curious to hear about you, Candace, and Hot Girl Finance. Are you comfortable talking to the women in your life, like your close girlfriends, nieces, whoever, about money? Because I want to with the women in my life, my close friends. But what I've noticed is that it's a lot easier for me to talk about money with women who are strangers versus talking about money with women who I fucking took shots with, who I like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I partied with, my closest girlfriends, they don't want to talk about it. They're just so ashamed, even though they know that I am a resource. I'm curious what it's like for both of you.
Yes, same experience. There's, comparison is always the thief of joy, right? And that's the risk when you open yourself up on money, because everyone has that comparison instinct, and it's so hard to not. Where I've had success is people who are significantly younger and just starting out, and so it's clear we're in different places, and so they can compare, and it doesn't hurt. That there's no expectation that someone just starting out will be in the same place as someone who's been at it for a while. And
Yeah.
it's more open to, saying, yes, I can learn this, and there's not the same expectation that I should have already learned this, and so I've done something wrong. So that's where I have had the most success. And then, as well, like you said, without those close personal relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and see, I come from a completely different perspective, being more of an introvert, and you would never know I'm an introvert because I pretty much live in the public eye. But in my situation, I think people have always sort of viewed me as being that brain. And so a lot of my friends are the type that will come to me when they need information and not so much when they're doing other stuff, because they know that I just tend to go off on tangents about whatever the thing is at the time. It could be anything from astrophysics to, of course, finance. I mean, it just doesn't matter. So I think in my case, it's a little bit different that way, but that's fine because I don't, I have a certain level of amount of social that I want. And then once I have that, I'm good. It's like, I'd rather curl up with a good book, or I'd rather learn some new concept, or, or make another YouTube video.
Yeah. I'm thinking about a time where one of my girlfriends reached out to me and she was like, "Hey, how do I make passive income?" And I was like, "Ooh, girl, let's do this. When do you want to meet? Let's talk about it." And we met over Indian food. And she was like, "Okay." So like she took out her Robinhood app. She's like, "Okay, Justine, what does this mean?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I started explaining it to her, right? And we talked about dividends. We talked about how that is a form of passive income. And then we talked about, increasing her income. She's a nurse, right? So she works 4 days out of the week. She's got 3 days off, but her 4 days are really hard, right? As you can imagine, like 12-hour days. So she was like, "How do I make more money and how do I get passive income?" And so we talked about other ideas of increasing your income streams, and all of that. And once we had that talk, you guys, that was the end of it.
Yeah, it's really easy to get once people realize what passive income can do.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I know on my channel, whenever I do any videos that have high dividend companies, covered call ETFs, they do really, really well. In fact, I'm actually doing an American ETF tomorrow. It's one of the yield max one, the TSLY. So, and it's got like a crazy 60, I think it's 63, 64% yield on it. So it's just big, and people have started to hear about it even up here in Canada. And it's like, because you take it even with a 60% yield, even if you put it in your TFSA, where here you would lose 15% withholding tax to the IRS, you're still way ahead of any dividend stock that we still have.
Yeah.
So there's been call for it. So I'm like, okay, let's do this, see what it does. And of course, on the channel, I think it'll do well.
Oh, that's awesome. Please share that with us. That would be great to see the reaction.
Yeah, well, we'll know tomorrow because that releases tomorrow.
Excellent. Yeah.
Justine, did your friend get after it, or did she completely move on to the next thing?
No.
Yeah,
It's sad to me, because and here's another thing that I think is also important, right? Setting those boundaries. So she will continue to complain about her financial situation and this and that. And at that point, it was just kind of like, you know what? I'm not going to insert myself, right? Like, you need to want it.
Yes.
And you need to want to fix your fucking life. I'm sorry for the F-bomb, but like, no, actually not sorry, because it's who I am. But I think as a friend, and for me personally, you guys, for me, I do not want to overstep myself. If you would like some help, I'm here for you. I'm gonna support you. But I also don't want to intrude or be I don't want to be that person that's like in your face. because I strongly believe that at the end of the day, you are going to be the one that pulls you through. You're going to the one that makes that decision. So unfortunately, my friend, she asked me all these things, but then she did not pursue it, and she continues to complain about her financial situation. And when she does, I let her know. I say, baby girl, you're choosing it. And you know what? I would much rather be that friend that tells you a little bit of the hard stuff so that you can choose to grow, versus me being someone that's going to butter you up and say, well, you do you, boo boo. No. You get what I'm saying, y'all? So it's, I just, Hot Girl Finance, I'm sad. Candice, I'm sad. Dave, I'm sad. My girl did not pursue it. But you know what? I hope that she does. She makes that decision at some point. You get what I'm saying? That's the only thing you
can do. Baby steps.
Yeah.
I think what comes from not having a good grasp on everything. The finance world is so big, and they dip a toe in, and suddenly they're like, "Oh my God, I'm in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and where do I go?" And so it's like baby steps. Here's one action that's small, that's concrete. You can take it, and it'll get you on the path, and then you can keep going. And that's where I've if I've had discussions, if there's not a one-step action, it's the same thing that you ran into. It falls apart. It's well received and it drops.
Yes. And I think that's why, for me, if I post my dividend posting, it's not to brag, but to show the growth, number one, that we all start somewhere. And number two, there's going to be one soul out there that looks at that $1.10 dividend that's reinvested, and they're going to be like, oh, they're going to think about, wait a second. So all of these people are making passive income through dividend investing, and that's not money that they worked for. You know what I mean? So at some point it will inspire. At some point it will motivate.
Yes.
But what's more important is whether that person who reads that $1.10 dividend reinvestment post from us, who then goes inside their heart and say, you know what? I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to take the jump, the leap, right? So I absolutely agree with you. I think the small steps are so important. And that is why, and I've said this before on this podcast, and I've said it, I just say it, take the small win.
Yes.
Take the small fucking win. Because guess what? When you appreciate your little wins, you start building that confidence. When you start building that confidence, then you're like, oh, I'm feeling myself. I think I'm gonna put a little bit of more. You know what I'm saying? And when you start feeling yourself, you feel you're ready to jump. And so the small steps now lead to the big jumps, right? So.
Yes.
And it doesn't take long for that. Oh, by the way, hi, I'm still here. And it doesn't take long for that $1.10 to turn into $2.20, $4.40, $5, $10, and you really see those baby steps in the beginning really starting to pay off in relatively short time, like a year, 2, 3 years down the road. And obviously you have to, with the dividend investing strategy, you have to really think that long term.
Exactly.
10, 15, 20, 25 years. The new host of the Passive Income Podcast, Justine.
No, I'm over here just having a conversation.
She's taking us over.
No.
Which is very welcome, Justine. I love having you on here. Like I said, yeah, it's your third time on, and you're always so enthusiastic and full of energy. So you're a great guest to have on for sure.
Well, I'm like super excited to be here. And I also really like hearing what what Candice and what Hot Girl Finance is talking about. Obviously, you too, Dave. So yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think one thing though that ties into what Justine was saying as well is I think the timing of the pandemic has really caused a lot of people to sort of dabble in investing and then fall off, because you get these people who started at the beginning of the pandemic, when we still had a bull market, things were going up. It was, I think Graham Stephan had a monkey pick a bunch of his stock picks, and they did better than the S&P 500 because it was hard to miss. You could throw a dart at the dartboard and still hit a stock that was going to go up. However, those people had never experienced a bear market. They had never experienced the type of things that we were about to see. Now, you take even crypto investors, they got it even worse. So when the market turned and we went into that bear market, I don't think these people were prepared. And they kind of had created a sort of a false narrative as to the way the market was going to happen. And then they got slammed down to earth really fast. Unfortunately, a lot of people, if you do that to them, they're just like, oh my God, that investing thing is crazy. I got to get out of this. And that's what they do. They basically turn their back and they never invest again. They don't even look at it.
Yes.
Those, of course, who came in and survived the bear market, now they're going to be much better off as we move into a bull market. And I'm actually hoping for a bull market by the fall. So it'll be very interesting to see how that works. And I'm always on the lookout for some of these people, men or women, doesn't matter to me, who have sort of become disillusioned, just to try to sort of give them an idea that this is part of the normal economic process, the economic cycle, get them excited again. And because the problem is, what they're missing out on is this is the time when you make the most money. All of these little investments you're getting while we're at the bottom of the market, they're going to look very, very nice in your portfolio in a year's time.
Yeah, I think you hit the bullseye, Candace. When people come in when everything is hot, and you see the number go up, to quote the meme, and then suddenly it stops, and it reinforces all those negative messages we've heard. It's too hard. You can't do it, and you see 10-20% or more, more if you're in crypto, disappear, and suddenly those voices get much louder in your mind. Oh, maybe it is too hard. Maybe it is a scam. And I think it's really important to keep reaching out to people that are newer, to say, look, it does go up, it does go down. You've got to stay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you look at that snapshot over like a 10, 15, 20-year period of the S&P, it's always, sure, there's ups and downs, but over that 20-year period, it's up, right? I don't think there's any time you can look at a 20-year period where it's down over 20 years. So you really have to take that long-term investing approach into your mind, into your thought
one
process.
other factor I think people have to bring in when it comes into this next bear market, that our bull market that we came out of before we all crashed, a lot of that was inflated. A lot of the market caps were inflated with all of that extra retail money from supports that the world governments were giving people because of the pandemic. So a lot of that ended up on the market. Now that that's gone, people have used it with just paying interest on larger rate hikes, things like that. So that money is now gone. So when we do go back up, we're not going to immediately jump up to where we were. It's going to take time. It might take a couple of years. If you ever really want to have a good look at that, back in, I think it was the 70s, the Japan market got insanely inflated, and they've never hit those highs again. But it was because it was so inflated. There was so much extra capital that had been put into that market and been propped up. A lot of it was the US that did that to them. But they've never recovered. But they're still, when you look at a giant bump, like take Bitcoin, if you look at the all-time highs that happened last year, if you were to just chop off those highs and look at the original growth of Bitcoin, you'll actually see that we're in line with where we should have been if that crazy money stuff from the pandemic hadn't happened. So I think people just have to sort of temper their expectations. I think it's going to be a slow climb up, but you're still going to make a lot of money on the way up too.
Ken has a great point here. That's where dollar cost averaging plays an important role in investing.
Yeah.
When people say DCA for the win, it's true. It's time tested.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I think I'm curious. I have another question. How would you, both of you, how how would you explain investing to a woman, right, to a female, about if they have fear towards investing? What words of encouragement would you say to them to maybe perhaps help ease that fear and spark that curiosity and in wanting to take that next step?
I think what I would do first of all is I think I would try to isolate the market down. Like there's a lot of really risky behaviors that you can bring into investing that, yeah, become almost like gambling because you don't know what you're doing. But I think if I sort of approached it from an educational view, like, okay, this is how the market works. This is how ETFs work. This is, these are the ones that are, true and tested. They've been around for a while. They're more blue chip, and get them into more of a blue chip mindset initially. Then once they've learned the market, if they want to start getting into more speculative things, absolutely go for it. But bring them in on the safest stuff possible, get them in that mindset, and let them learn. And the number one motto I would give to somebody new is that if you're not 100% sure on something, don't put your money in it. Go hit the books instead. And then when you come back and you feel much more confident, then you can start putting your money there, because you have to have patience for investing. It's not a short game. It's a very long game. So I think as long as they come in with that proper mindset, that will really sort of cultivate them in the right behavior to make some good long-term returns.
I love that. I love that. I think that's really great advice.
Yes, I think you've got to start with behaviors, and
Totally.
Not everyone. It pains me to say, not everyone's going to end up interested in this stuff. There's a lot of people. It's just not for them. They, yes, are excited, want to have more money, want to have more freedom, more time freedom, and investing is the way to get there. But there's a lot of people where target date fund can be the beginning and end for them. It's but even if you're not interested, you've got to start. You've got to start. That's the biggest thing, the biggest message that I have.
Just get on base. I say it all the time. It's my
Yes.
Moneyball
Get off
reference.
zero.
Just get on base.
Get on base, get off zero. You've got to start. You don't have to dive 10 layers deep. You may never get there. That's fine. But if you stay on zero, that's where you'll be 20, 30 years from now. You'll have, the same bills, the same empty bank account, and the same struggle if you don't change something.
100%.
And I mean, there's also people out there that really want that hands-off approach, in which case it's like, look at this Vanguard company and all of these wonderful ETFs that you can, start to build a portfolio that you can get different exposure, whether you want an all equity exposure, whether you're looking for something with a little more dividends. And then they can sort of start putting some money in there. They could even, depending on their broker, they could even just set it up so that maybe, $100 comes off every paycheck automatically and goes into, whichever ETF it is that they're using, or if it's a combination of ETFs. And then they've got a nice hands-on where they can sort of leave it alone and come back in a year and look at how much money they've grown and be like, holy banana bread, I can't believe I got all this money. Right. So, it's kind of a neat thing. And I think there's a style, an investing style for absolutely everyone. You just got to find the one that's going to work for you, and how much time you want to put into it, and how much learning you want to do. If you don't want to do any learning, we've got those ETFs for you.
Another great point by Ken here. There's nothing wrong with nickel and diming. You don't need 10K to start. Like, so true, especially nowadays with fractional shares. You can literally start with $1, $5, $10. So, you definitely don't need to have 1,000 or 5,000, or like Ken says here, 10K. You can start with a very small amount and grow from there.
Oh yeah. I want to piggyback off of what Candace said about, going back to the books and the education piece. I 100% agree with that. I think, one, if you don't know something, ask for help from someone that does know a thing or two, right? And on top of that, do the research. it's not just about what everyone else is buying, but also what Candace just said, what fits you, right? If I'm talking to someone, for example, my friend that I was telling you guys about, when I talk to her about investing, I put out index funds and ETFs and explain to her that you have the opportunity to hold the top 10 performing companies in the S&P 500, or you have access to all 500 companies, large, mid, and small cap, right? So I think instead of having to choose individual stocks, I think index funds and ETFs are a great entry point for first-time investors. I know I started with an index fund, and then eventually I was like, "Ooh!" And then I slowly started going into dividend investing, right? I mean, individual stocks. So what Candace said, everyone's different, and you'll find what you need. You'll find what you need with investing. And then to piggyback off of what you said about fractional shares, you know what, you guys, when I first started investing, I was big on like, oh, here's, for example, here's $200. I'm going to buy full shares of X, Y, and Z, right? And then I would have like maybe $10.65 left in the brokerage account. So then I'm thinking, or the settlement fund, right? And I would just leave it there until I deposited my next DCA, right? Dollar cost average payment of 200 or whatever it was at the time. And I would just always buy full shares. And then eventually it was like, hold on, girlfriend. You're leaving $50 or like $10.65 not working for you. So then at that point, I was like, all right, if I'm just buying 0.2 shares of VU, then let it be.
Right.
You know what I mean? So at that point, I was like, I literally started making all my dollars work for me. So that mindset, but I didn't think of that until I self-educated, until I started learning more and went back to the books like, wait a second, girl, this is doable. This is doable. So yes, yeah.
And is it worth the fees, those covered calls? I'm not sure. Were we talking about covered calls anywhere in there?
I love to.
Yeah, go for it. If you want to talk about covered calls, now's a great time to segue into it.
So one of the things that I was thinking about before was kind of my investing journey and starting with ETFs and then moving towards individual stocks. And I went back and forth, chased the tech names, play it safe some with some dividend stocks, really finding what resonated with me the most. And so more recently, I have moved much more to looking at selling covered calls, cash secured puts, to the point of making your money work more. And this is what really hit me of, I see after every post about it, how do you do that? What is that? Tell me more. And it really is that next step into people have heard it's too hard. Options are risky. And so one of the projects I'm working on is putting out a guide of, here's how you do it. Here's how it works. Here's what they are. Here's how you do it without blowing up whatever you're doing. Accept your risk, understand it. So getting to the specific message there, are the fees worth it? I think a lot of brokerage are pretty cheap now.
Yeah, I think most of them are under a percent. So
yeah, I mean, I think most of the contracts that I trade are around $3.50 through Schwab. And so, very affordable. But again, it's do your homework, like Candace said. If you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. But once you learn it, and really it can be pretty accessible to learn. Once you learn, then absolutely, it's another tool for your toolbox. It's not probably your best bet all in, right? But to amplify returns, to understand that that's further out on your risk spectrum with a part of your portfolio, I think is a fantastic thing. To educate people about, to help them understand that is a possibility.
Yeah.
Well, another thing as well with covered calls too, some of them will do return on capital. So as a result, one of the things I usually always tell people is put them in a registered account. So in the US, like a Roth IRA, or up in Canada, like a TFSA, something like that. Just so that way there, you're not really worried about your cost base changing due to return of capital. But what I do is I mean, I love covered calls for the dividends, but at the same time, my biggest preference is total return stocks. So one that has like a moderate dividend, but has a lot of growth at the same time. Because you look at, if you have like a 10% yield on a covered call stock, and over here you've got a 5% yield on a stock, but it also grows, 10% or so every year. That's a 15% return opposed to a 10%. So just one of those things I always say, keep that in mind. Don't just look at the yield and don't straight chase the yield, because there are a lot of really great opportunities out there to make some really big returns, especially when we had the oil boom earlier. Almost any oil stock you bought was going to give you 20 to 40% returns just on the growth alone. And some of the smaller ones, I've seen some smaller ones that were giving more than 100%, like doubling their stock price in a year. So if you had managed to get on one of those, you would have definitely been very happy. Of course, if you were looking for yield, you wouldn't have gotten involved in any of those, and you would have missed a lot of opportunity.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point, Candace.
Just a question. Can we interact with the chat? I see it pop up on the right side of my screen. I guess we just comment.
Yeah, just go ahead. If there's anything you want me to pull up on the screen, I can do that. So just interesting point, going back to what Candace was just saying about sort of some of those, oil and gas growth stocks where you might miss out if you're looking just at sort of dividend yield. Obviously, kind of like two very different animals, right? Whether you're, strictly investing for growth, or strictly investing for that dividend and dividend, hopefully dividend growth, or obviously you can do some kind of mix of the two as well. I guess just any thoughts on those two types of strategies, or three types of strategies?
I usually think it comes down to your age, to be honest. If you're young, in your 20s, even in your 30s, you're probably going to want a heavier dose of growth stocks. Transition then into your total return, so your hybrid stocks, as you move through 40s, 50s. And then as you're starting to gear down and heading into retirement, that's when you really want to start looking at going with a lot of the heavier passive income, so that you can create, especially if you're using your registered accounts correctly, you can create a nice little extra income that's not going to impact any other government retirement supports, which is huge. Especially like in Canada, we have like old age security and another thing called the guaranteed income supplement. You can lose those if you make too much money, but if you've got all of that dividends coming out of a registered account, none of it counts as income. It's just free money every month or every quarter, for the rest of your life.
Yeah. I think that speaks to how important it is to diversify your portfolio. I think I just read a statistic that now it's about 67% of women in the United States who are investing outside of their retirement accounts, which is great, because back in 2018, it was like 40-something%. So there's been that big jump. But that does speak to what Candace just said. I think that's why diversification is important, because it's good to have those extra income streams outside of what the government is giving you and outside of what a 401k or 403b is giving you. So yeah, I think it's important to have a diverse portfolio.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And it's really interesting, like, because you sort of hit on people using their registered accounts incorrectly. I know my mom, I was looking, and she's like, she had $15,000 sitting in her TFSA as cash. I was like, what are you doing? You should be investing this. You should be getting something back on it, because right now you're just losing purchasing power every year thanks to, our good old friend inflation. But for her, she's like, no, it's a savings account. You just throw your money in it. I'm like, no, you have to invest that money to make it grow, make it work for you.
Yes. Right. That's the important piece there. I think a lot of people, what happens is you open up a Roth, you open up an investment account, and you put money in, and then many people think like, okay, I'm invested. And it's like, no, y'all, you need to pick your investments. You need to get
It
into
always breaks my
that game.
heart when I hear that.
What was that, Hot Girl Finance?
So it always breaks my heart when I hear that. You were so close.
Yes.
So close.
Yeah.
Heart was in the right place, opened the account, funded the account, and left it there.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to leave it in there, at the very least, get like a guaranteed income certificate or sort of guaranteed investment certificate or a bond or something. At least put it in something that's going to give you some amount of return. Especially right now, like you can get some pretty good yields on some of the different income certificates, bonds, some of the options that are available right now. So it's like, do something.
In the U.S., treasuries are paying close to 5%.
Yeah, it's the same thing in Canada, and that's kind of like your version of a treasury is sort of like our guaranteed investment certificate, GIC, up here.
Got it.
You can get a 2-year one for like 5%, whereas the 10-year ones are really low right now because we've kind of got that inverse going on. But if you're going to leave the money there, at least throw it in something. I mean, even if you get 5% back over a year, at least you've gotten something.
Yeah.
5% is a lot better than 0%.
Yeah,
Every
100%. 100%. Yes.
And I've said this before so many times, Candace, about that TFSA here in Canada, tax-free savings account, where it really should be called a tax-free investment account. But I think maybe the government didn't want to use the word investment because maybe that scares people off, and using the word savings maybe more. I don't know what the answer is there, but in my opinion, it really should have been called a tax-free investment account.
Yeah, no,
just my thoughts on that one.
Yeah. Just I'm thinking about the marketing piece there, right? Like, which one are you gonna listen? What will most people listen to? Investment account or tax free, right? Like they're gonna hear, oh, tax free. It's more appealing than
exactly. You had me at tax free.
Yeah,
right. Exactly. That's true. So one of my girlfriends, she reached out to me the other day, and she was like, girl, as a single woman working, how do I save on taxes? Because I'm paying a lot on taxes. And I told her, I was like, first of all, I want to be very clear. I am not a tax professional. So what I'm telling you right now, I need you to go to a tax professional and double check. So there's my disclaimer. Okay. But then I did tell her, so in the United States, we have like an order of operations, it's there, it exists, and it's good to follow. But you've got your tax advantage accounts, and then you've got your just regular brokerage accounts, right? So I asked her, do you have a 401k or a 403b at work? She's like, yes. And I'm like, all right, try to maxing that out, right? Do you have an HSA? Do you have a Roth? And so I was explaining to her, like, as much as possible, try to max out these tax advantage accounts, such as the HSA, the Roth, your Roth IRA, your 403b or 401k that you're offered at work. Max out those accounts first if you can, because there you can take advantage of the tax advantages. And the way we even describe it here is we call them tax advantaged accounts, right? So she was like, oh my gosh, Justine, I had no idea you could do that. And I was like, yes, girl. Now go to your tax professional and double check. But I would say if you have all of those, try as much as possible to max those out so you can take advantage of the tax advantages. So
one of the other crazy things, thinking just geographically, the tax burden in California versus Florida. I mean, it's big.
Oh yeah, it's different. You're right.
Yeah, I think in Canada it's a little bit different. The tax burden. I think when you're born here, you're born into about $30,000 worth of debt if you paid your share.
Oh, you guys have it easy. Down here we're closing in on 6 figures per person, I think.
Wow.
National debt wise, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah.
That's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I think there's something like 8 states that have 0 income tax at the state level.
Mhm.
Yeah. Florida's one of them, right?
That's right. Florida,
Texas.
Tennessee, Texas.
Yeah.
Isn't Nevada one as well?
Yes.
So yes.
Yeah. That's why you see a lot of people moving out to these states because they want to save on taxes. Like it's a big thing here in America, right? How do I save on taxes?
Yeah.
How do I get not, and
Yeah, and I mean, and I've heard California has some of the worst. So,
oh God, it's just. I taught a financial literacy class to a group of 9th graders for 2 weeks back in March, so last month, and many of them were asking about taxes. They were just like, what about taxes, Justine? And I'm like, well, let's not talk about that right now, because they were 9th graders. So they're 14, 15 years old. They're not working yet. But we did briefly touch on it. I did this exercise with them. I was like, all right, let's pretend that you are working at In-N-Out. You're working at, that's your part-time job, and you're making X amount of money. And then I told them, okay, now you're gone full time. And let's just say that your full-time amount that you're getting each month is $1,000, right? You guys, like, I just put something out there for them to do simple math with. I was like, how much is rent? How much is groceries? How much is this, right? And then I explained to them, okay, wait a second, but here's how much is being taxed on all of these things and whatnot, and how much is being taken out of your paycheck. And it was a very humbling experience for the students because they were like, oh my gosh, like, what is this? I'm like, yeah, that's literally the government saying like, this is ours, So it was a good exercise to do with the students.
Yeah.
But yeah, taxes here in America are a hot topic, I think.
Yeah.
I would say the same here in Canada, right, Candace? Like we quite often talk about how we're taxed on top of tax, and I'm sure it's similar in the U.S. where it's like, okay, well, I get my paycheck, so immediately my money has income tax come off of it. Then I go to the grocery store or whatever store to buy something, and then there's sales tax on it, and it just seems like an endless amount of taxes that we're always paying.
Yeah.
Yes.
although I got to say, there's one nice thing about being self-employed is I don't have to pay those taxes until the end of the year.
Right.
So I can invest them and make money on them and then give that share of them to the government. So I at least have that going for me.
That is nice.
Yeah.
So,
Oh gosh.
I'm no expert on taxation, but down here, self-employed typically has quarterly estimated tax because they don't like you to keep your money for that. For 12 months before they get a slice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the nice things too is I do a lot of my rebalancing at end of year too, because I use tax loss harvesting to make sure I never pay a cent on capital gains.
Yeah.
And it's quite effective if if you look for your opportunities through the year when you want to move a stock that's already deep in the red, and you're like, I can move it to this stock. They're both doing just as well, and that's given me my little deduction for the end of the year. Balance it off against some gains that I take later, and then yay, no taxes.
It's always a beautiful thing.
It is very good. And I mean, if you own a business as well, like I used to work for this real estate person, and I was helping him with his taxes. And the things he was writing off was just, some of it was ludicrous. Like he wrote off all of his dog's food at home. And I said, how are we justifying this? And he's like, I've got company assets there and they protect it. I'm like, seriously? Have you missed your dog? Like, seriously, if somebody tried to break into the house, the dogs would probably lick them.
Right.
That would be it.
I love it. I love the creativity. Hopefully he doesn't get audited, but love the creativity.
Right. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That's another thing too. I think, and Hot Girl Finance, you can maybe chime in on this as well. But here I think there's so much of wanting people to be part of the rat race. Like you start working for someone else.
Absolutely.
And what we don't teach kids in our school system that if you actually become a business owner, right? Like then that's when you get all these tax breaks, right? It's a different ball game of playing versus being a 9 to 5 or staying working for someone else.
Yes, absolutely. There's what I call capital letters, the path, right? Go to school, get good grades, go to college, get good grades, get a job, move on up and stay on that path. And there's such big blinders to anything besides that.
But I mean, the big problem with college is once you get out of that, you've now got a giant debt bill.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Woo! Let's not even talk about that.
It sounds like you can relate to that one, Justine.
I can. I really, truly can. But that is a student loans here in America. It's brutal, and I do believe they're predatory. I said it. I think they're predatory.
The tuition costs, just the change in tuition.
Yes.
20 years ago.
Yeah. See, I was lucky. I made it through without any bills, but that's because I just used scholarships.
That's awesome.
Because knowing, and this is the thing in grade 12, knowing I was going to university, I put my nose to the grind. I finished as the #1 student in my school, and that got me the scholarships. And then I just had to put in the work to keep on renewing them. And that way there, I didn't have a big bill at the end. But I know a lot of people who are coming out like, almost $100,000 in debt to start their life. And I'm like, that's no way to start a life.
Look, here in the US, there's nothing easier to do in college than to get that big fat student loan. They've got that and the credit card marketing on campus where they set up their tables. Hey, get a credit card and a free t-shirt, right? And it's something I laughed at the time, and looking back, it's disgusting.
Well, I know I had a friend at university. He actually went and checked off every single credit card in this pamphlet that came out, and he got every single one. And of course, he got himself into big debt problems because of it. But I was just like, holy banana bread. No, thank you.
Yeah. With no income, here's $10,000 credit limit, right? Go get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's that's a whole different student loans. That's a whole different topic.
What school did you go to, Candace?
I went to St. Mary's in Nova Scotia, but that's because they were offering me the most money.
Right.
Like I had wanted to go to Dalhousie, but St. Mary's put too much money on the table, so I was just like, yeah, I can't turn this down.
That's understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I took a double major in biology and chemistry, and now I'm into finance.
Which, by the way, I think is an important lesson that it's okay to change your career path.
Oh, yeah.
You don't need to.
The whole thing about university is it's not what you're learning, it's that you're learning how to learn. And that's what you really get out of university. That plus you probably have a lot of great drinking stories, but you're learning how to learn. You're learning how to rationalize, how to process information that you're going to use the rest of your life. Because I know one thing that somebody once said to me because I also went and did tech and I learned how, about computers, the internet, everything else. I asked one professor once, I said, what do you do when you run into something you don't know? And he's like, well, if somebody asks you if you can do it, always say yes, and then go teach yourself on the way home. So that way there you can come in the next day and do it.
I love that.
And, it works. It really does. I mean, but you have to do all of the homework once you do get home. If you say yes and then you show up the next day and you haven't done the homework, you're in trouble.
Yeah, that's interesting, Candace. I don't know if some people may know this. I worked construction for a lot of years in the past, and quite often somebody would say, "Hey, do you know how to operate that machine?" And the answer was always yes, and you would just get in the machine and figure out how to operate it.
Oh yeah. I mean, and it happens. I mean, I think with me once, probably the hardest time I said yes, and then I really had to learn. Somebody was like, "Oh, are you familiar with the ASP language?" I was like, "Yes." I no clue. All I knew at that point was HTML and CSS and some, a little bit of JavaScript. But I picked up this big book. I went home and I read and I read. And then once, of course, I went in and I had to start programming in ASP. I had the book with me, and I was just, I at least made myself familiar with where everything in the book was, so that I could hubble and get code that I needed.
Interesting.
It worked though.
And that's such a great philosophy of accept the opportunities, step outside your comfort zone, and be willing to figure it out.
Absolutely. And I'm one of these people that, quite honestly, my best performance comes when my back's against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people are like that, right? Like you just.
Well, exactly. Well, you take it like in when I was in high school, my mom was like, "Why do you always wait to the night before to do your big projects?" And I'm like, "Because if I do it a week ago, I'll get a B. If I do it tonight, I'm going to get an A."
Interesting. Wow. Well, I see we've already been chatting for over an hour here, and I'm sure we could probably go on for another hour or two. But I know everybody's got things they need to get out and do on this Sunday afternoon. I know it's still mid-morning for Justine out there in sunny California. So, any last thoughts before we wrap it up? Anyone?
Just want to say thanks for having us on. It was great. I encourage everyone to certainly reach out with questions. Want to continue the conversation. Love to hear from everyone.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, thanks for having us. This was fun.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming on again, Justine.
Oh, thanks.
You're now in the lead here on the Passive Income Podcast. Candace, you're tied for. There's a lot of people in second, but second place is pretty good. And Hot Girl Finance will have you back again sometime soon too. So,
love to. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you all for coming on and spending some time. Thanks to everyone in the chat, and please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe.